Hello, I'm Susan Noyes, the founder and Chief Visionary Officer of Make It Better Media Group, as you just heard. I want you to know that I am speaking to you from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where we are in the clubhouse of a home that my family's been coming to for 5 generations. So it looks a little different than usual. And I am delighted to be hosting Whittier Trust is doing good for your portfolio, unpacking ESG investing with Thomas J. Frank and Craig T. Ayers. Tom Frank is the Executive Vice President, Northern California Regional Manager in Whittier Trust San Francisco office. He is responsible for managing complex client relationships, including investments, planning, and family dynamics and fiduciary services, as well as all operations, revenue, staff, and other elements related to the Northern California region. Craig is the Senior Vice President, Senior Portfolio Manager in Whittier Trust San Francisco office, and he enjoys working with high net wealth families and their philanthropic foundations, investing in portfolios individually tailored to each client's unique circumstances. They are perfectly qualified to be speaking to this very important topic right now, ESG investing. So here they are, Craig and Tom.
Susan, thank you very much for that warm introduction. We are delighted to join Make It Better Media and Marin Magazine in particular to talk today about ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. I'm joined by my colleague Craig Ayers, as you mentioned, he's the investment guru. So we'll let him talk in just a moment about some of the details about how we approach environmental, social, and governance investing and helping clients align their personal values and their investment portfolios. So I am going to share my screen now. Hopefully this will work. There we go. I think hopefully you can see everything there. So is doing good for your portfolio? Well, this is a very timely, very timely discussion. Let me make sure there we go. So ESG is definitely in the headlines. And what you can see actually is a newspaper, a real newspaper clip, not just from a website, on the right-hand side that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, decided yesterday to provide more scrutiny on funds and investment vehicles that claim to be socially good or environmentally good ESG portfolios. And the gist of this article, if you haven't had a chance to read it, front page of the Wall Street Journal today, is that investors commonly look to the name of a fund, a mutual fund, for example, or an ETF when making investment decisions. And so it isn't just enough to label something as ESG. The SEC is now going to make sure that there's some teeth behind that it actually pursues and has some sort of a process behind selecting good investments. You can see on the left-hand side a clip from last week, actually, why Tesla was kicked out of the S&P 500's ESG index. That's from the CNBC website. This made big news last week. And it isn't because, Tesla, obviously you think, an electric car company, they've got to be great for the environment. Where they were faulted was on the S and the G part, perhaps not treating their employees as well as they could or should. You can see the Wall Street Journal ran a big in-depth report a couple of months ago on this. You can see here headlines from the Financial Times, executive pay, replacing greed with good. This article talked about some of the governance items that we look for in ESG investing. You can see Reuters here has a headline that global green finance rises over 100-fold in the past decade. So this isn't just a fad among money managers and investment managers trying to sell product to investors. It really impacts all areas of the financial services industry. If you look, Blackstone, which is a huge investor, particularly in private businesses, really talks about, they have a whole section of their website that talks about building stronger, more sustainable businesses, and even getting down into mutual fund companies. Nuveen is a popular provider of mutual funds. Responsible investing, what does that mean? You can see here clips from both the Fidelity and T. Rowe Price websites where they talk about sustainable or ESG investing. And then even in the financial services, just the regular sort of banking environment, right? Forbes talked about ESG here is banking's next big thing. Craig and I, our office in San Francisco is down in the financial district, and there is a bank, the Bank of the West branch downstairs, and they have a huge banner that really touts their environmentally friendly policies and the fact that the bank won't lend money to companies that pursue, coal or dirty, what they perceive to be dirty industries. And so very, very interesting stuff in the news. This just seems to be more and more prevalent. In fact, on my drive into the office this morning, I was listening to NPR, and Schwab had an ad on the radio that talked about their ability to help clients place funds in vehicles that will align with their social values. And then this is kind of hard to read, but really what it is a clip from CalPERS, the country's largest pension fund, which is the California State Public Employee Retirement Pension Fund, back in 2015, writing into their core governing principles, governance, environmental, and social policy considerations. And this, Craig can talk a little bit about this in a moment, but this really gets to the heart of some changes that were made on a regulatory basis, where it used to be, you couldn't, big pensions and endowments were really prohibited from looking solely at ESG factors. And, 7 years ago, even the rules were changed to make it that those things have to be considered. And so, very much a timely discussion here today. Just to set the stage a little bit before I turn this over to Craig to talk more about some of the portfolio specifics. This chart really talks about the history of impact investing, and it goes all the way back to the 1700s, where some of the Methodists and Quakers used what we call negative screens to not invest in alcohol, tobacco, and gaming companies. Benjamin Franklin, do well by doing good. And then what really solidified this, or what I think of when I think about ESG investing and the origins, really is the issue of apartheid. So for those of us who were around when that horrible regime was in place in South Africa, we remember boycotts and real social activism around making investments in companies that did business with South Africa. And then there have been all kinds of developments since then, including the Domini Social Index, which was created in the 1990s, which is a benchmark for socially responsible investing. Today, sources note that there are over $17 trillion in sustainable investment strategies spanning all asset classes. So not just regular stocks and bonds and mutual funds that folks like us might invest in, or that our clients and friends might invest in, but private equity, private debt in things like clean water projects, sustainable agriculture, green building, all kinds of things. So just to sort of set the context, right? This is a very hot topic today. It means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and I think that's one of the things we hope to highlight today. A note just before I turn this over to Craig: we do want this to be interactive, so please post your questions in the chat, and Susan will either interrupt us or we'll pick it up, and we look forward to hearing from you and your thoughts and questions. So now I will turn it over to my colleague Craig Ayers.
Thanks, Tom. Great introduction. First of all, we're really excited to be here with Make It Better Media, because this is a make your portfolio better type of situation. So it's a perfect pairing. Talking about aligning investments and values. Impact investing is generally known, and it's kind of an umbrella term for a lot of jargon that you'll see out there. as a way for your environmental goals and your other and social goals to also generate a profit. And in certain cases, it can actually be more profitable because, as you can imagine, treating your employees well makes them more motivated and a better way to go in terms of productivity. And one of the questions we're getting right now is just would economic sanctions against Russia qualify as ESG activity too, like apartheid? Yes, they would. What's happening with Ukraine right now is absolutely horrible. And those sanctions are part of what the US and other companies have been doing for a long time. And one of the big companies that you may have seen in the news is just McDonald's is pulling out of Russia. McDonald's went in 1990. It was glasnost, if you remember that, with Gorbachev. And it was a time when there was going to be a lasting peace in the world. That has changed dramatically under the new regime of Putin. And pulling out of that speaks volumes. It does make their economy even weaker, and maybe we can get some change. So yes. Next slide. There's another way to approach this as well. So that's about the investing portion, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's also activist investments. And activists, they seek to influence management at companies and make positive changes. And there's a fantastic firm right in our backyard here in Oakland called As You Sow, that you can allow them to vote proxies on different companies that you may have an investment with. This would be if you were investing in a company that's really not ESG and you're trying to get them to be environmentally and socially and governance focused. The big one this year and over the past year and a half was a small hedge fund called Engine One managed to get CalPERS, which Tom mentioned before, as one of the largest pension fund. It is the largest pension fund in the United States, on board with it also, and get 3 seats on Exxon's board. Exxon has traditionally always been fossil fuel oriented for hundreds of years. At one point, they had a brief moment when they became an energy company instead of a fossil fuel company, but then they moved away from that when oil prices went up. And so Engine One got seats on the board in order to influence them, not just for the environmental impact, but also for profitability. If you think about the last 100 years, fossil fuels have been extraordinarily important. Fossil fuels actually saved the whales because we used to get all of our oil from whales. That's evolved. They're no longer as relevant as they used to be, and they are probably going to decline. If you're going to invest, you may not want to be in a declining industry over the next 50 years. And so they either need to change what they're doing, or you need to change your investment number for that class. We'll go to the next slide. So ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. These identify companies that are leaders in their industry. They're better managed. They're more forward thinking, and they're better at anticipating and mitigating risk. So if you think about a firm that is sourcing inputs, so coffee beans, for instance, from an area that is not well water resourced, eventually those coffee beans are going to run out and they're going to deplete that resource. And so they need to be very careful about where they're going from an environmental perspective and about using those resources. And so it creates a less risky, more sustainable flow of inputs that they can then turn around and sell to customers on the other side. So it's a risk mitigator. Also, on the evolution of acceptance, virtually all the investment vehicles now have access to impact investing as the fiduciary rules changed and evolved to view it more positively. When CalPERS, Tom talked about in 2015, put that into their governance documents, before that, for the ERISA requirements, was just kind of a retirement group that manages a lot of assets, especially for unions. Those rules said, if you consider ESG, you may be personally liable as a manager for doing that. They completely flipped that and said, if you're asked to consider ESG and you don't, then you're liable. And so it's become way more important. It was a watershed moment, and the industry's doubled since then. Go to the next slide. So the ESG also enhances the investment process. This isn't just about doing good. Doing good is great, but Ben Franklin, one of my favorites in history, so do well by doing good. And I think that's very apt for what we're doing these days. You want to align your values with your investments, but you also get increased transparency. And we're getting better and better data as companies are being asked for this information about how much carbon footprint they may leave and how they treat their employees and what their diversity is. It helps us better understand those risks and opportunities. Opportunities are really important. They've done a lot of studies that actually show if you have a diverse employee base and board, then you're going to be able to address a much wider audience, which just makes absolute sense in terms of who your customers are. And so you're going to have a bigger customer base. And then there's active shareholder engagement via proxy voting, which is what we talked a little bit about before. If you own a certain amount of stock for over a year and you're going to keep it for a year, you can get on their proxy and ask them to go ahead and address an issue that's near and dear to your heart. As you saw, one of the examples that they had early on was the e-waste program at Apple. They actually got in touch with Steve Jobs when he was still with us, and they put together a robot named Daisy that takes apart your iPhones after they're old and done with, and takes, I think, about 200 a minute apart to recycle all those materials. Actually better for the company and better for everybody. Most importantly, impact investing is an effective tool to address positively and impact the critical issues that we're facing in the environment today. In California, we have a lot of fires. Across the world, we've just got way more stress overall that we need to address environmentally, as well as the social aspects of social justice. We can go to the next slide. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the misconceptions around ESG investing, because you'll hear a lot of this. One is that you have to have concessionary returns or accept lower investment returns. That's not what it's about. The other is that it's charity, and this is not, philanthropic charity is fantastic. That's a great way to go, but sustainability, if you invest in a company and it's a going concern for a long time and profitable, it's probably going to last a lot longer. So that's also very good. This is not to supplant charity in any way. It's to augment it. And then some people talk about it limiting your investment options. That's really a misnomer. And yes, it's true. You want to get rid of some companies that are bad actors. But if you're fishing from a cleaner pool of investments, that's a better way to go anyway. And all the investing that I've seen in all of my years on there's some sort of screening to say, okay, I want companies that are growing faster, or I want companies that have better valuations. All of that is just, this is just another metric like that to go into your analysis and really look at the quality of the company and the quality of the management. And the other thing is, some people will say it's just a fad, like the pet rock or something. That's certainly not true. This is taking hold and will continue to evolve. So on the environmental factors, as mentioned before, we look at resource depletion, deforestation, waste and pollution, climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions is probably the biggest single factor that's being focused on these days. Recycling and reclamation and restoration of our natural resources. So greenhouse gases is going to continue to be a huge issue for the world as we face climate change. And that is one of the factors the SEC is definitely putting into their documents as they propose new things for the fund managers to focus on. When Tom talked earlier about the SEC and the new rules that were going into effect, and they did fine one company, and the fine wasn't terribly large for the size of the company, but the relevance of it is huge, in that people are going to be called out and really be forced to actually do what they say they're doing. Next slide. So the social factors are the working conditions. This was one of the things with Nike, your shoes. They changed dramatically when they got called out about child labor and who was putting together the shoes. That's happened with other companies as well. The local and indigenous community impacts, if there's conflicts with the local communities, the health and safety of employees is extremely important. And there's a lot of metrics around that to see how well companies are treating their employees in terms of safety. If you think about oil rigs and other things, or even supply chain factories, the safety of the employees becomes extraordinarily important. The sustainability of supply chain policies, and then employee retention and compensation. So living wages, just making sure that everybody can afford to live where they are. That is a big challenge in California these days. In terms of the governance factors, these are things that we looked at before, but they're important in looking at the overall picture. So you look at executive compensation. Is the CEO making so many multiples of all the other employees that it becomes egregious? And that's not a great thing. The political lobbying and donations are important to see if they're trying to steer laws their way. Board diversity and structure, the remuneration and incentives that the management has, the audit controls and internal risk policies, and internal risk and transparency. Those both include privacy, which is becoming a much bigger issue. That's one of the things that Facebook does not make it into a lot of ESG investments because of their privacy issues or lack of privacy, I should say. And then their tax strategy. Are they actually paying their taxes? Is important as well. So just talking about the growth, you can see here in 2012, it started to take off. In 2015, it went into multiples as it gained more and more credibility with investors and acceptance. So it's had almost a 19% annualized growth over the past decade, and 1 out of every $3 under management in the US is invested in some sort of sustainable investment strategy. People are on board with this. And then performance, this is something that we talked a little bit about before. Do you have to have concessionary returns? This is just one of the indices that's been around for a long time, the 400 Social Index from MSCI. And you can see there on the blue line that is actually outperformed the S&P 500, which if you're trying to beat a benchmark, that is the bogey that you have as an investment manager and extraordinarily difficult to outperform. There will be times when it underperforms. This year, a lot of ESG indices have underperformed as oil has skyrocketed in prices. We're certainly seeing that in our car and fuel. What that does is puts into a lot of people's minds that they may want to get an electric vehicle. So it's actually driving towards more renewables in the end. But unfortunately, it's also financing Putin's war against the Ukraine. So not a good thing. But the performance factor is that when energy outperforms, you're probably going to underperform as an ESG investor, and that's okay. Long term, we believe that will not be the case, and that you'll be better off without fossil fuels.
Craig, while we're on that topic of fossil fuels, a question came up in the chat. Are there any large oil and gas companies that are, making progress towards green energy or more sustainable energy?
So both of the big majors are making some progress towards that. The local one here, Chevron, has had more of a diversity program in place for a very long time in terms of diversifying to renewables. They're not very fast moving yet, so we'll see what happens. And then Exxon, with the influence of Engine 1 and those seats on the board, is making changes. They may be being pulled into it, but they're actually doing some fairly significant changes to the company that could lead to a better future. The other one that's major is British Petroleum. BP years ago, if you remember Deepwater Horizon, the rig that went on fire and was just a horrible disaster. They had a little bit of a renewable energy group within the firm, and it was a pittance. It was just extraordinarily small. That forced them into doing a lot more, and so they've actually made progress towards that since then. So we'll talk a little bit about greenwashing. What British Petroleum was doing before was greenwashing, making them look green and friendly to ESG. But once they said that they were doing that, they actually got forced into it later. So it can't be a good thing. Some other examples of companies that have positive attributes and are making a material impact. One is JP Morgan. This is one of the best, if not the best, bank in the world. They've done little things like being there when the hurricanes hit. This was a while ago in Texas, Florida, and Georgia. They also have great compliance systems. that improves your privacy rights. And so that's something that they adhere to and are very careful with. It's not on here, but they also have a great program for what I would, what they would call differently able folks. So somebody who has Asperger's or some other thing that makes it very hard for them to work socially, but they have a great positive impact on the company because a lot of times they have other great skills. And so the company has made an effort to work with a diverse group of people as well and employ them. And that's very important. So you wouldn't guess it. An important point about all this is JP Morgan, I'm not sure how many hundreds of thousands of employees they have across the globe. It's big. They will have some bad actors within that. And it's just a matter of the leadership weeding those out and making sure that they address them in the right way. But nobody's perfect. And that's the other part of this. We want companies that are doing well. Another one is Apple. This is on the environmental and the social. 100% of Apple's facilities worldwide are powered entirely by renewable energy. Investing in this just drives the innovation and makes it available to others. There's some fantastic companies. I know that 20 years ago, when you looked at solar panels, a lot of the experts at that time said there's no way that they're ever going to be efficient enough and cheap enough to be buying. Here we are 20 years later, and they're just that. They're actually competing with fossil fuels. They've also improved the oversight of the supply chain and work closely with suppliers to ensure compliance with their ethical and sustainability standards. And they won an award for all of this. So it's done a lot of work. And as I mentioned before, they have a device named Daisy, who takes apart iPhones and other equipment and recycles all of that because, you always have to have the latest iPhone. It's nice when you turn it in that they're actually recycling it. It's not going to do it.
So Craig, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. It looks like we have a question in the chat about Apple and by extension, I will just add other technology companies doing a better job of allowing people to repair their devices rather than replace them.
So that's a really big issue, and it's not just the technology companies, it's also some of the car companies and others, and it's the right to repair. And so if you buy something and you have to take it into the company when it breaks and they charge you an exorbitant fee in order to fix it, the Europeans are way ahead of us on this, and they're addressing it in terms of the regulations. You should be able to try and fix it yourself or have somebody else fix it so that the company has competition. There are car companies that if your battery dies, it can cost you $1,000 to get it replaced because it has to be done at the dealership. And if you don't have that car company, then it costs $150. So it's a huge change. The other company that is very good from a providing food to the world and doing a lot of precision farming, which doesn't require as much in terms of pesticides and other things and chemicals, which is great, is John Deere. I don't know how they're going to address that, but right now there's a lot of controversy around forcing farmers to come back to the dealership in order to get the tractors fixed when they might be able to do it themselves in another way. So those things a lot of times get disrupted also by new startups. Monarch is an electric tractor that's come out that's viable. It's great. You can actually run it on your iPhone. And one of the things that they built in is easily repairing it, so you can do it yourself. And then we have Alphabet, better known as Google. They renamed their parent company Alphabet to cover everything that they were trying to do from A to Z in terms of the moonshots they talk about. Automated driving with Waymo. If you live in San Francisco, there's a bunch of Jaguars driving around the city with spinning tops on them and other things that they're trying to automate driving and do those sorts of things. They are the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world. So 100% of the global operations, like Apple, like Microsoft also. Microsoft's gone a step further and said they want to make up for everything that any pollution that they've caused since they were incorporated in 1975. So they're actually doing a lot better. And we'll probably see some amendments do that as well. They also, there's a lot of things around minerals that are mined, the tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold mining. They want to develop conflict-free sources of that. There's other companies, there's a lot of issues around lithium, either improving lithium because it goes into car batteries and other lithium-ion batteries, that needs to be improved, or we need to come up with a different type of battery. So there's a lot of research going around that. And then we talked a little bit around greenwashing. It's a really important topic. And one of the things that I think is important for people to realize is that I wouldn't want people to ever get discouraged about investing with impact and ESG because of greenwashing. And that's because, yes, companies do misrepresent some of their efforts, or they oversell them in terms of greenwashing. But as that happens and they get caught, then they get forced to go back and actually do good environmental, social, and governance and impact for their employees and others. So if they're going to put it out there, and there are watchdogs coming out and looking at for those companies. Allbirds is a company here in San Francisco. That stock has crashed since some of their claims of being environmentally friendly were exaggerated or not true. Some of the stuff they are doing is true, but this is going to make them step up a little bit more. Could be a great company again, but this is forcing some of the improvements. And so there's a lot of news out there that comes across and says, the only way to do this is through government regulation. And then there's the other side that says government regulation, companies will just work around that, and they'll do whatever they want, and they'll just cheat and meet some standard, but they won't meet it for the rest of their environmental efforts because they'll just have one regulation to conform to. It's going to take both. It's going to be really important for regulators and for private enterprise to address the climate issues that we have, as well as a lot of the social unrest and other things that we have. Food supplies today are definitely in jeopardy with the war in Ukraine, and that's going to highlight another issue and bring that to other parts of the world. The other question that we just had come up, which I think is really interesting, is about investment advisors who greenwash and trying to avoid using them. So that was the article that Tom talked about just now with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is no slouch in terms of enforcement. You don't want to run foul of the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's a bad one. That can have hefty fines and other things. And they put people on notice, advisors, that if they claim to be ESG, they better be doing some due diligence behind it. I think that going into this, they're going to need to select investments that are actually ESG, and they're also going to need to be able to report on that. So that improving transparency and data measures, these just continue to evolve, and they're becoming a risk for bad actors. That's something that we want, and something that we want to continue to fight against. If you want to learn about what your advisors are doing, it's very easy to look at the top 10 holdings. For what we do with clients is we actually issue them a report through a firm called Your Stake that is fascinating, and that they actually look at what your weight is in a certain stock versus the benchmark, the S&P 500, or all of the US. They can use anything that you want, and say, based on what you hold, and if you don't hold Exxon, which again is a controversial one, then over the next 10 years with $1 million, you will have harmed 8,448 fewer fish. And how do they get to that? They say, well, Exxon does chemicals that go into ethylene, that go into plastics. These plastics, 30% of the plastics produced actually make it to the ocean. And these 3 studies have shown that those plastics in this amount harm a certain amount of fish. So there's a little bit of a leap of faith there, but it does connect the earnings to the impact and what you're doing and the investments to the impact. So some of the conclusions around this are aligning personal values with investments continues to be one of the highest growth areas in asset management. There's a reason for that. It's working. This is an important aspect that we've been talking about. There are many ways to approach impact investing, including using it as a tool to analyze investments, which is what we do. We actually use it as an investment tool as well. And investors are influencing company policies and managements with a corresponding beneficial social and environmental impact. I can't overstate this. There's a lot of folks who say, ESG isn't real. Elon Musk has certainly tweeted about it and been very upset as Tesla was kicked out of a couple of ESG indices. And I think he actually called it the devil. This will need to continue to evolve. There is a group here, partially in San Francisco, called SASB, If you're familiar with FASB, which is the Financial Accounting Standards Board, they are the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. Deliberately rhymes with FASB, and will be an important point in terms of getting these metrics and actually measuring things.
Craig, this is super informative. And between the two of us, I think we have probably, there may be a little bit of an echo. Maybe could you mute just a minute? There we go. Yeah, I think that's better. I think between the two of us, we probably have close to 60 years of combined investing experience with wealthy individuals and their families. And, you know, what I've found, and I know you and I have talked about this whole area is highly investor specific, right? So the families that we work with, some of them come to us, perhaps they've inherited a very large position. We have a handful of these where they've inherited, you know, large positions in oil companies, for example. And that may have been where the family wealth was created. In fact, the Whittier family's wealth was created in an oil company, but that's not where it is today, right? Or that doesn't align well with the current generation's values. And so, you know, you may want to talk a little bit about some of the considerations that you look at when advising families about making these kinds of transitions in their portfolio. There can be tax ramifications and things like that.
Yes, moving a portfolio to ESG can be more of a journey than just doing it overnight, and especially with tax implications. A lot of folks don't want to sell off all of their shares in Chevron that their grandfather gave them because they're going to face a big tax bill. The way that you can address that is actually turning over the proxy vote to As You Sow, and they'll vote that for you. So that would be one of the processes to go through. The other way that we really like to work with clients in doing this is everybody has a little bit of a different hot button or a topic that they're really concerned about. For a lot of people, it is fossil fuels. And so we will focus on fossil fuels and be sure to have that out of their portfolio. And then we'll want to also look at their risk and let them know, again, if fossil fuels are going to do really well because Putin has invaded the Ukraine and there's an oil supply problem, then their portfolio is going to underperform during that time, just so they know what to expect and do some risk mitigation around that. Long term, they'll do just fine. If they take out too many things, then we also want to make them aware of that it can impact their portfolio.
I have a really important question related to what Tom just asked. How do you actually work with the second, third, fourth generations? You know, there's got to be some communication strategies that are important.
We do that in a couple ways. So one of the ways is that we hire a lot of folks here who are fantastic in terms of, but they're younger. And so we'll oversee the portfolio, but they're a lot younger than Tom or I. And so there's a lot, they can relate better to them and communicate that to them. So they'll have their own set of advisors that they can go to and that they're comfortable with. I think that's a really important thing generationally. Right now, for the Whittier family, which isn't a very big part of the company anymore, but they're on generation 6. And so there is a lot of experience transitioning through those years. And then there's a lot of estate planning as well, not just about ESG, but there's things that we can do in terms of preserving that wealth.
I think a lot of times, Susan, also the families may carve out a piece of the family foundation or the donor advised fund and allow those younger generations access to those funds. And so, you know, we, as Craig mentioned, we'll have some of the younger professionals in our office work with them on their goals and objectives for that particular sleeve of it. So it provides both wealth management, investment management training, but it also allows that generation space to kind of create their own objectives around this.
Okay, 2 more questions have come in quickly. Can you please comment on Merrill Lynch's performance in this area?
Okay, so the lawyer in me will come out now, and unfortunately, we are not going to comment about any investment manager's performance in this area. I think, as Craig mentioned, there are a number of standard long time socially responsible investing benchmarks. We look when we're managing a normal, um, large cap U.S. portfolio, we benchmark to the S&P 500. So we would recommend that folks talk to your investment advisor about what they're benchmarking to, and then you can do a little bit of research pretty easily on different ESG indices out there that might serve as a good benchmark.
So are you saying that there are indices that would allow people to understand how financial firms score in ESG advising? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Less that than how like an actual portfolio would perform, right? So if there's an ESG mutual fund, for example, that a particular manager might have on their platform, you can just Google that and look at the benchmark that they might use. And if it's a socially responsible benchmark, how does it perform? I think the thing that became, is apparent now, right, that we've talked about from the beginning, is there's some controversy around this because ESG tends to mean different things to different people. Some people focus more on the E part than perhaps the G part, or vice versa, right? So it's not, each investor is very, very specific. And then, just because a fund calls itself ESG or an ETF calls itself ESG doesn't necessarily mean that they're employing one of those screens. And so that's what the SEC wants to get involved in and make sure that if companies are making these claims, either by the title of that fund or otherwise in their marketing materials, that they actually have some sort of a process behind it. And I think, what we try to do with our clients, and Craig and his team are fabulous at this, is really look at, what are the individual objectives that family has for their portfolio in terms of ESG metrics, and then how are we constrained, right? Because particularly if these are inherited assets or something like that, they may have very low cost basis. So, while it may be great that the family wants to get out of, I'll pick on Exxon, even though I'm not trying to highlight any company, it may not be practical, right? It may take a period of time. And so what are the other things that you can do? And then some people have very, very specific areas that they want to invest in. So it might be biomedical research or clean water, for example. And there are, we didn't really talk about this because it's a smaller part of the market. It's harder to access for most investors. But there are private investments as well, whether that's private equity or venture capital that invest in these. And so larger family foundations may take advantage of those kinds of opportunities to make certain investments that are, governed under the tax code. There's a specific kind of, it's called a program related investment, or a PRI. We didn't go into detail in that today, but for very large institutional size investors, they can take advantage of some of those opportunities.
Could you speak a little bit more about the difference between investing in an individual stock versus investing in a fund versus private equity ESG investing, please?
Yeah, this is a favorite of ours because we like to look at individual securities. So if you invest in a fund, then that's good, but you're along for the ride. They're going to make the decisions around what you're going to own. If you invest in individual securities or have somebody make those for you, then you have control over the entire portfolio and you can make those individual investments as you see fit. The other nice thing about it from a long-term perspective is that as markets go up and down, you can take tax advantages of that and choose the individual securities whenever you need cash that work best with your tax profile at the time. With a fund, you just kind of have a one-shot deal. So that control over your individual securities is great. The last part about it is that you're not layering in an additional set of fees. If your advisor is charging you one fee, and then they're picking funds that charge another fee, and sometimes there's what's called a load, meaning that they get a little bit of a commission in order to sell that fund to you. None of that exists when you're picking individual securities.
And the private investment space, Susan, whether that's
in private equity.
Yeah, so the private equity or venture capital, those are a little harder to access because you can't just pull those up on Google and find those investment opportunities. And typically those have a much less liquidity. right? Craig, you want to jump in and add to that?
Yeah, this is an exciting area. There's a lot going on. If you looked at this 10 years ago, there was no money for environmental impact. It was really hard to get venture capital and private equity to fund those firms. Uh, there's some really exciting ones out there. So we do it in two ways. One, we will source individual investments, and then we will also source with managers that are focused on impact investing. And so they're doing it through, again, Tom talked about the farming and sustainable farming and organic farming that's being done. That can be very profitable. We did one individual company recently called Turntide. It's a local company. They're on electric motors, and their motors for heating and air conditioning use less than half what a traditional air conditioning unit uses. And Turntide is just a fantastic way to, instead of sourcing from different energy, using a lot less energy.
Do you have other examples of companies or for that matter, private equity opportunities in very specific categories like the one you just gave?
So one of the firms that we work with here is also Great Point Ventures. They've done a phenomenal job of going and providing healthy food. They work with a firm called, I believe it's an area, and I'm going to get the name wrong, Susan, called Farm Shop or Farm something, and it's actually a vending machine with salads. And it is a distribution company, and it is healthier eating, and they do a really nice job with it. They're in Chicago, and they've expanded from there. That's one of the investments. They do a lot around climate change, but also food. One of the early investments that they made that I think most people are aware of was Beyond Meat, and or Beyond Beef or Beyond Meat. I should know this. I eat a lot of it.
Beyond Meat. Beyond Meat.
Yeah. And they were way back at the beginning, and so they've had an investment in that as well. So Great Point Ventures does a nice job with that.
Great.
One of the nice things in working with a firm is sometimes the minimums to get into those firms are very high, and if you can be in with a firm like Whittier, then we'll group clients together, because a lot of times they'll have like a $5 million minimum to put the check in, and so if you can be in with 20 other Whittier clients, that becomes much more manageable, because if you have a $10 million portfolio, you don't want to put $5 million into one item. So that's a good way to go as well.
Do your clients who want to invest in similar things that you group together, do they actually get to know each other if they would like to?
They would like to, they do. A lot of them have similar donor advised funds or foundations that are working towards common areas, and so they'll get to know each other as well. Education is such a cornerstone of so many of our clients in terms of what they want to do. The other one is animals and wildlife.
Talk a little bit more about that, please.
In terms of the animals and wildlife, the Wildlife Conservation Network is here in San Francisco. They do a really nice job in terms of getting money out. They're actually part of a group that's called Legacy that we've just learned about recently. That's one of the things with ESG and impact investing is every time you think you've got a handle on it, something new comes up. And Legacy is a firm that actually gets access to really good investments early on in Google and Facebook and other companies that, whether you consider them to be ESG or not, they're well known and they've been vetted by the huge firms like Benchmark and Sequoia, and they get access because they're doing good. So that people will put money into that, and the returns actually go to their cause. And then they also get to network within the group, and that was one that we just learned about recently from a client who came to us with a legacy portfolio and told us about legacy investments, and they do a really nice job, and we get to talk to them and have people meet each other. So yes.
We find a lot of families also use their philanthropy in that way, Susan. So they're in addition to their investments aligning up with one another, they like to donate to the same things. So that's a good way for clients to kind of get together on common ground.
So we have a philanthropic group that's all they focus on is foundations. and working with them. They actually run the meetings and do everything but the audits and the legal, and they'll do site visits with people. And so we do have clients who come to us and say, I really want to do something in helping animals, but I don't know where to put the money and which charity is going to be most effective. And so we'll run some screens on them or tell them, oh, there's another client that has done this. They've had a great experience with this, and this charity has done a really good job. And so we get a lot of networking effect from that, networking power of knowledge.
Fantastic too. I can tell that working with Whittier is network expanding, like-minded individuals expanding opportunity. There's a question that I know that you're not going to like in the chat, and that is, what are your fees?
Yeah. So we'd probably rather handle that offline.
I know from working before that clients get what they pay for, and that you are doing fantastic work, and that's the thing to focus on.
Yeah, I would just say, Susan, it sounds like your internet's breaking up, but we'd be happy to speak with anyone directly about a specific situation and talk about our fees. But I would say that we are very competitive with the other investment managers and wealth managers in our space, working with ultra high net worth individuals and families.
I was very impressed with that 19% return. And I have heard over the years that any studies where they have really, where a company has invested in the community, for instance, Eli Lilly invested strongly in the city of Indianapolis to ensure the quality of life of their employees and the community they were serving was better, that there's always greater returns in the long run. Can you please speak to that?
Well, I'm surprised Tom didn't jump on that one, because if we say always greater returns, our legal counsel is going to be very upset with us.
Okay, I'm sorry, but it is.
But on that, yes. There's a consistency to it, and there are academic studies that have gone around and said, yes, there is a revenue enhancement, there is an earnings enhancement by having companies that are treating their employees well and investing in their employees. Not every company does. I wish that were the case. It would make choosing stocks a lot easier and investments, but most of them do well. The ones that you want to watch out for are ones that are trying to cheat the system a little bit, and they're always getting caught up in some litigation or something else, and usually the hammer drops at some point, and you're in trouble. This is not different in a big way from what Warren Buffett does. Warren years ago was taught by his comrade Charlie Munger, who said, you don't want to buy the cheapest company out there and get just kind of a free write off something. You want to buy the most sustainable company at great prices. And so Warren has come out and said, I don't do the impact investing. That's something that if you make your money on one side, that's hard enough. Then you can give it away on the other once you've made your money. But if you look at his investments, they really do that. They're higher quality, and that is what ESG is about: is treating customers and employees better, and everybody's better off that way.
And supply chain and all the different communities served by the corporation.
Definitely, thank you. Yes.
So I do think it's fair, and let me state it not quite so affirmative or authoritatively, but it is true that doing good will help the company do better in the long run. And that is sort of the bottom line of your presentation today.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the quality considerations that should go into play when building a portfolio.
There's a lot of different ways to do it, but it is making a difference.
We are grateful for every investment advisor who is focused in that direction too, because we need all the good minds possible working on solving problems and moving our world to a better place. So we're so grateful for this opportunity with you.